How we're going to do this then is we are going to split everything into 3 categories because there's a lot to get through here. We're going to look at design, we're going to look at the user interface and usability, and the cameras on each phone. First up, design. This is a big deal now. You know, smartphones used to be all about power, particularly with Android, because that was where you could add functionality. But now with everyone kind of just being Snapdragon 800 and being as powerful as you can get, it's about the design and the way it feels in your hand. And the HTC is kind of king of that by a long way. It's just more premium than any other Android phone that I think has existed up until this point in time. However, Sony is not far behind. It's sort of 2001: A Space Odyssey creation here is a lot less evil than the thing in the movies, but also very, very nice to hold. The bezels here and here, far too big. It feels like there's loads of wasted space and they could get rid of it and the phone could be a lot smaller because of it, and it was a problem with the Z1 as well. And then we move on to the Samsung, which quite frankly is a little bit of a design disaster in that this is better than the faux leather back, but essentially it's still not nice. It's just not that exciting. It just feels like a Samsung phone, whereas Sony might have been iterative with their design and basically redone the Z1, and HTC's just added more metal to the original one. But with this, it's just a phone. There's nothing that exciting and nothing to talk about. 2 of these phones have a party trick. The first one you can see now.
One of the best things about the phone is it's waterproof. So if you had to be on a speedboat going really fast along the Thames, it doesn't matter if it gets wet.
Both the Samsung and the Sony are waterproof, which means that if, as you just saw, you happen to be on a speedboat, or more likely, you drop it into probably the toilet. We've used a bowl of water here to simulate it, but basically the phones aren't going to be knackered. And just for a kind of here's one I made earlier moment, you see me on the speedboat, perfectly happy doing it as well. What you need to understand about these 3 phones is basically Android is not the Android you know. They are not Nexus devices. They've gutted it, changed it, made everything unique to stand out from each other. The problem is they don't always get it right. With the Sony, the best way to describe it is it's a very swooshy phone. If you look at it here, you know, the lock screen moves around, it's all very animated. The problem is by heavily animating it, it lags the phone up. And unless you get rid of it all, the phone doesn't feel as quick as the other 2. Get rid of it though, and it does. There's some quite nice little tweaks though, one of which is a kind of actioning system. So if you, for example, plug your headphones in, you can set the phone to launch applications when you do it. So I plug my headphones in, the volume goes to a certain setting, Spotify opens and starts playing music. I really like that. I would prefer to have seen more in the kind of notifications menu, more done with that, quicker settings. The camera app as well is a little bit dodgy in that it just doesn't make sense the way that the camera app is laid out. You can leave it on auto and just use the shutter, and for the beginner that'll be fine, but for me, I've bought a flagship smartphone, I want to be able to fiddle around with it. Other than that though, it does feel really slick. There's a kind of synchronicity between the user interface that makes the whole phone feel very premium, which brings me on to the M8. The M8 is essentially exactly the same in that the whole phone feels like it's one single thought out concept, from design right through to the last point, you know, to execution. You've basically got logos, icons, color schemes, everything matches together and it looks really nice. The camera app, although the camera itself is not very good, the camera app is really, really simple, very quick. Finally, onto the Samsung. Again, we've got a few kind of weird design decisions. Samsung came on stage and explained when they announced this phone that they were looking at adding user focus, and what the user can do with the phone was going to be at the core of everything. So there's a download booster. It combines Wi-Fi and 4G to give you faster downloads. That's really, really handy and really clever. The camera app is a little bit off, and we'll talk about that more later, but I mean, essentially the camera app is just loads going on. It doesn't really make sense. If you just want to take a photo, it could be simpler. But the real kind of bugbear I've got with this phone is the settings menu, which it just doesn't make any sense why it's been laid out like that. They've obviously had an idea for a new color scheme and then just run riot with the idea of the number of icons that they can possibly put into one single menu. What I can't complain about, however, is how quick this phone feels. Just from a day-to-day usability standpoint, this is a rapid phone. So, cameras. I don't care what anyone says, it's really important that your smartphone has a good camera. No one carries around compacts anymore. use your mobile phone to take photographs of everything. Now, if by complete coincidence you happen to have acquired an Audi R8, you may or may not want to test out the photographic capabilities of these three phones on it. The HTC, if you give it lots of light, this thing here is called an ultra pixel sensor. It's very low resolution, but it has very big pixels. Lots of light, you don't throw it anything difficult to take photographs of, and you will get a nice photo out of it. You can also take 3D photos and refocus the image after you've taken it. You can do the same on these, but it's nowhere near as good as what HTC does. Problem is, as soon as it gets dark, the camera starts to show a bit of weakness. And the other thing is, if you make the photo big, print it, anything like that, it is quite obvious that it's low resolution. Onto the Galaxy S5. Now, the camera in this is basically your bog standard high resolution smartphone camera, except for it has two rather clever things that it can do. One is it can shoot live HDR and live HDR video, which HDR is high dynamic range. Photo geekery aside, it basically makes your photos look better. You get more detail, more color, things like that. The other thing it can do is that it's very, very, very quick to autofocus. Basically, this is the camera that you want to carry around with you if you've got kids or pets or anything like that and you want to just go, boosh, snap, take a photograph. Finally, onto the Sony. Now, they've put a lot of the stuff that they use in their kind of high-end compact cameras into this. It's got an Exmor RG whatever super duper sensor in it. In practice, it's probably the most interesting camera of the three, in that in the right settings, the photos you get are absolutely fantastic, but it doesn't like differences in exposure and difficult situations, and it's not as quick as the Samsung. One of my most favorite things about the HTC One M8 is the speakers you get with it. These boom sound speakers on the front basically put out much louder sound than what you would normally get on a smartphone. Case in point, if I am to record us revving this rather loud engine here, you can probably, I hope, hear it even over just the engine idling. You don't need a Bluetooth speaker anymore. It's decision time. Which smartphone do you pick? First things first, it doesn't matter what I think. Basically, I would have an HTC One M8, but that's because I like design. I like products that feel focused, and form is important to me. So if it's important to you, the HTC is definitely the smartphone to go for. On the other hand, there is, let me just get it out of my many, many phones in my pocket, the Z2. Now, the Z2 is a really interesting product because basically it puts polish on everything that was wrong with the Z1 last year. Screen's better, user interface is better, it's quicker, battery life's good. It's a solid product. It's not as nicely put together as the HTC, but it's still a pretty lovely thing. However, the Galaxy S5 has one outstanding quality, and that is, to me, its screen. Samsung have always got things right with displays, and this one is beautiful, bright, vibrant, sharp, and it's going to catch your eye. The camera's also very quick. It's a real kind of smartphone camera, ideally suited to, you know, day-to-day photography. It has some clever tweaks, but the user interface isn't that solid, and I think the build quality just lets it down. It's just not as nice a thing to hold as the other two. So, make your decision. Are you a form person or are you a functionality person? Or, if you're straight down the middle, go for the Z2.